Namaskar. This is Firstpost and you're watching Vantage with me, Palki Sharma. Our lead story tonight is India's budget, an interim budget, but a significant message, both to the domestic audience and the world. We'll discuss what this message is and bring you 10 highlights. Also tell you what's going on with Paytm. An order from India's central bank has as good as killed the business of this digital payments giant. In the US, Mark Zuckerberg has said sorry again, but it doesn't cut it. Social media has been declared a public health hazard, yet no government is taking steps to effectively tackle it. Are America and China fighting a cyber war? Washington has accused Beijing of launching a major attack. In Europe, farmers are on the war path. We'll tell you what their protest is about. In the Pacific, the nuclear alliance AUKUS is expanding. The future of the world is AI and the future of AI is India. We'll explain. Also, the moon is shrinking. All this and more coming up. The headlines first. European Union approves 50 billion euros in aid to Ukraine. The deal was passed after overcoming opposition from Hungary. In December, Budapest had blocked a similar deal. The aid package is a major boost for Kiev amid doubts over America's support. Armenia snubs Russia, joins the International Criminal Court. The Kremlin had warned its historic ally from joining the Hague-based court. In recent months, Armenia has distanced itself from Moscow, upset over Russia's role in the Caucasus. UK police launch a manhunt after a suspected chemical attack in South London. A corrosive substance was thrown at a woman and her 2 children. More than 10 people injured, including police officers who tried to help. No arrests have been made yet. Drought emergency declared in Barcelona. The Spanish city will now face tighter water restrictions. Other curbs include ban on filling private swimming pools and washing cars only with recycled water. Barcelona has not seen significant rain in the last 3 years. And Lewis Hamilton could switch to Ferrari for the 2025 season. That's what reports say. It will be a surprise move by the 7-time world champion. Last year, he signed a 2-year contract with his current team, Mercedes. It was budget day in India today. An interim budget was passed, the last budget before the upcoming general election, which is why it's an interim budget. In an election year, the full budget is not presented because a new government will be formed in a few months and they will bring a new budget. So for now, what we have is a plan for the next 2 to 3 months. It basically means that the central government is placing a request to withdraw money to meet expenses for the short term. And yet, it is significant because this budget also sets the tone for what lies ahead. It outlines policy priorities, areas where money will be allocated and schemes that will shape India's growth story. So what does today's budget tell us? What are the focus areas and key takeaways? We've put together 10 highlights for you. Number 1 is taxation. It's the big talking point in every budget. Everyone wants to know this. How are tax slabs changing? Well, this time, they're not. No change in taxes. Your present income tax slabs remain intact. So if your earning has not changed, you'll continue paying the same amount of tax.
Over the last 10 years, the direct tax collections have more than trebled and the return filers swelled 2.4 times. I would like to assure the taxpayers that their contributions have been used wisely for the development of the country and welfare of its people. I appreciate the taxpayers for their continued support.
In other words, thank you for paying your tax, keep paying it. Same with indirect taxes and import duties, no change in slabs. What about savings? We have something to report on this front. The government will withdraw old income tax demands. These are small and petty notices, they will be taken back. And with this move, 10 million taxpayers will get some relief. Highlight number 2. The government wants India to become a developed economy by 2047. They're calling this period the Kartavya Kal, meaning the time to fulfill your duty or kartavya and make India a developed economy in the next 23 years. It's an ambitious target to have, considering the many challenges along the way. Listen to this.
Geopolitically, global affairs are becoming more complex and challenging with wars and conflicts. Globalization is being redefined with reshoring and friendshoring, disruption and fragmentation of supply chains and competition for critical minerals and technologies. A new world order is emerging after the COVID pandemic.
Highlight number 3, the government has specified its focus areas. It is paying attention to 4 groups: the poor, the women, the youth and the farmers. Policies are being crafted around these 4 groups to bring about their upliftment.
As our Prime Minister firmly believes, we need to focus on 4 major castes. They are Garib, Mahilayeं, Yuva and Annadata. Their needs, their aspirations and their welfare are our highest priority.
And this was a recurring theme throughout the speech. Highlight number 4, the big achievements. Transferring benefits directly to people. The focus is on cutting distribution loss. And here is what the government says it has delivered. More than $110 million to farmers, over $260 billion in loans, and these have been given to 430 million people under the Mudra scheme. Now, these are special loans designed to serve small enterprises, companies that work at the grassroots levels. And like I said, the focus is on direct transfers by the government, eliminating middlemen. This has been mainstreamed. According to the budget, more than $400 billion have been deposited directly into the bank accounts of beneficiaries. This has put an end or minimized leakages and led to savings for the government. 7.8 million vendors have been given credit assistance. Women have been allocated houses under a central government scheme. 70% of all rural houses went to women. So those were the major achievements that the budget talked about. Highlight number 5, tackling multi-dimensional poverty. Now, usually we define poverty on the basis of money. We measure it on the basis of purchasing power, like how much money you earn or spend in a day. But that is just one dimension of poverty. It doesn't capture the full picture. People may feel poor due to a variety of reasons, like when they cannot afford basic necessities like electricity, food or water, when they are forced to pick an inferior school for their child, when they cannot afford proper treatment because of costs. There are many cases where one medical emergency can financially ruin a whole family. These are all different versions of poverty. These people may not be poor by the traditional definition, but they all experience poverty. So what the government is trying to do is this, trying to tackle multi-dimensional poverty through empowerment.
We believe in empowering the poor. The earlier approach of tackling poverty through entitlements had resulted in very modest outcomes. When the poor became empowered partners in the development process, government's power to assist them also increases manifold.
Not just handouts, but empowerment. And the government says it is showing results. In the last 10 years, it is said to have uplifted 250 million people. The idea is to reduce poverty in every shape and form. Number 6, interest-free loans for the youth and housing for all. Listen to this.
For our tech-savvy youth, this will be a golden era. A corpus of 1 lakh crore rupees will be established with 50-year interest-free loan provided. The corpus will provide long-term financing or refinancing with long tenors and low and or nil. I repeat that sentence. The corpus will provide long-term financing or refinancing with long tenors and low or nil interest rates.
Highlight number 7, the government wants to make home buying more affordable. A new scheme is being launched soon. It will focus on the middle class. In addition to this, the government says it will build 20 million houses under a central government scheme, and their construction will take 5 years. At least that is the plan. Highlight number 8, a big push is being made to promote solar energy through rooftop solarization, meaning installing solar panels on rooftops. The plan is to identify 1 crore houses for this. They will be given solar panels and 300 units of free power every month. How does it help? In 3 ways. It will reduce the load on power grids. It will enable transition to green energy and reduce your electricity bill at the same time. If implemented well, these ideas can be game changers. Highlight number 9, fiscal prudence. The government wants to borrow less and spend more. The fiscal deficit target has been set at 5.1%. How will the government balance the books? How will it get the money that it needs to spend on welfare? They're placing a big bet on disinvestment. And they've set a steep target of around $6 billion for this. This is how they'll make money. Highlight number 10, the special focus on women. The finance minister made multiple announcements targeted at women, like on the healthcare front. The government is expanding its universal healthcare scheme. Now, women healthcare workers at the grassroots will get health insurance. They want to encourage vaccination. Reports say the government is in talks to reduce costs for cervical cancer vaccines. They're also focusing on the financial well-being of women. There was an announcement to empower local self-help women groups. Their members are known as Lakpati Didis or Prosperous Sisters. They're encouraged to pool their resources and harness their skills to earn a minimum of 100,000 rupees every month. That's 1 lakh rupees, hence the term Lakpati Didi. The government will allocate more money to such groups from $240,000 to $360,000. Prime Minister Modi spoke after the budget speech today and he called the budget incisive and innovative.
इस बजट में कंटिन्यूटी का कॉन्फिडेंस है। ये बजट विकसित भारत के 4 स्तंभ युवा, गरीब, महिला और किसान सभी को एम्पावर करेगा।
So those were the key highlights of the interim budget 2024. Now let's talk about what the budget really means, the big picture, if you will. This, as I've been saying, was an interim budget. It's not the done deal. It's almost a teaser. The real budget will be shown in July after the general election, which means this was more of a business as usual document, which is why there weren't too many tweaks, neither to tax slabs nor to budgetary allocations. But a few things do warrant a closer inspection. First, we'll talk about fiscal prudence. What does it mean? It means spending government money responsibly, prudently. You measure it through budget deficit, the difference between expenditure and earning. The lower the deficit, the better. It means you're spending within your means. Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman says the budget deficit is expected to go down to 5.1%. It is already lower than expected. The projection was 5.9%. Right now it's 5.8% and it's expected to go lower to 5.1%. Let me tell you what that means. It means that the government is reining in excess spending. It is not taking on unnecessary debt, meaning future generations won't be burdened with an unsustainable debt bomb. Do you know what the Indian government's single greatest expense is? It's interest on old loans. It was at 10.55 lakh crore rupees in 2023-24, 10.5 lakh crore rupees. It will be 11.9 lakh crores in 2024-25, almost 12 lakh crore rupees of interest. That's more than the government spending on defense and transport combined. This needs to be whittled down, and that's what the Indian government aims to do, tackle the unsustainable debt. This requires a steady hand, a willingness to cut back on extravagant expenses, and that is reflected in today's budget. It also reflects something else, confidence, as the Prime Minister put it. The present government seems confident about its return to power, so it doesn't plan to spend money on wooing voters. Instead, it is tightening its purse strings, confident that its track record will see its return to power. This allows the Indian government to remain financially responsible, even on the eve of elections. The Indian stock markets have noticed this. The major indices fell a little today. Sensex by 0.15%, Nifty by 0.13%, but nothing devastating despite the lack of government largesse. It is a sign of a strong economy, not reliant on handouts. And that is why it's business as usual, and that's a good thing for everyone, even India's neighbors. We took a close look at one area of today's budget, the allocation to India's External Affairs Ministry. How much money are they getting? Specifically, the grants and loans to foreign governments. We give money to other countries in the form of grants and loans. This is to try and get an idea about foreign policy priorities. How much money are we giving to which countries? One point of interest was the Maldives. As you know, India and the Maldives are going through a bit of a rough patch at the moment, with their new president, Mohammad Muizzu, taking every opportunity to insult India. But New Delhi has not taken this to heart. India has allocated more grants to the Maldives than it did last year. India's 2023-24 allocation was 400 crore rupees. This time it is 600 crores. And this is not a hard limit. There can be more. Indian grants to the Maldives were worth almost double of last year's allocation. So we gave them much more than what the allocation was. So President Muizzu's India Out campaign clearly has not broken ties, and there's still hope of the Maldives mending relations with or without Muizzu. He faces impeachment, remember. India's other neighbors retain their usual grants except for one, and that is Bhutan. India's allocation for grants to Bhutan have fallen sharply by almost 600 crores. India does plan to loan more money to Bhutan, but there's a drop in the overall allocation. Having said that, it should be noted that Bhutan receives more money than any other neighbor of India, close to 2,500 crores every year. Compare this to an Afghanistan that gets some 200 crores, and even less for Sri Lanka and Bangladesh. However things pan out externally, it seems the Indian government's domestic agenda is quite concrete, and that stability can only mean good things for India. How do you ensure stability? Through robust institutions, through checks and balances, enforcing regulation and ensuring fair play. In the last 24 hours, we saw one example of that. The RBI's order on Paytm. The RBI is the Reserve Bank of India. It's the country's central bank. And it has delivered a big blow to Paytm. Paytm is a digital payments giant in India. It controls around 13% of the market share in India. But now its business has been crippled. Starting March, digital payments on Paytm will come to a halt. Customers using Paytm wallets won't be able to top them up. Basically, if you see a Paytm QR code anywhere you are, chances are it won't work, because the RBI has as good as killed it. Now, to be clear, Paytm still has a license to operate in India, but the RBI order has put it under significant constraints. So starting March, Paytm won't be able to process most payments, and that poses a problem because Paytm says it caters to 500 million Indians. 500 million Indians. The company has opened 300 million digital wallets and 30 million bank accounts. That's a lot of people and a lot of accounts. Come March, all these accounts will become useless. And this is a strong move by the Reserve Bank of India. It's a sweeping order. But why was it necessary? The RBI says Paytm has not been playing by the rules. According to the bank statement, Paytm was punished, and I'm quoting, for persistent non-compliances and material supervisory concerns. So the issue is non-compliance, not following the rules. And the RBI order does not get into the details, but Paytm has had frequent run-ins with the Reserve Bank of India, and this scrutiny began way back in 2018. Fundamentally, it centers around the KYC rules. KYC is Know Your Customer. There are rules on how much you should know your customer, and what you can do with that knowledge. Let me explain. Imagine there's a party happening in your neighborhood at a really cool club and you want to go. But there's a bodyguard at the door and he won't let you in. Until he sees your photo ID, he wants to know who you are, where you live, and check your photo against your face. If it matches, he'll let you go. A bank works just like this bouncer. Before they open your account, they ask for some papers. They're supposed to establish who you are, where you live, and whether you are a real person or not. So when you approach a bank, you're asked to give copies of these papers and to fill a form. This process is called KYC. No bank will open your account or extend any service to you without this. Now, any good guard would also respect your privacy. They won't go around the neighborhood telling everyone that you were at that party. They won't click your photos or photos of your ID and share them with the world. They shouldn't. They should not share any information about you without your consent. And this applies to banks too. They must maintain secrecy. They must protect your personal information. The law mandates it. Paytm got a license from the RBI in 2015, and when an RBI license is given to a bank, it has to comply with the KYC rules. But it appears that Paytm was not complying, or so the RBI believes. Now, reports say that the RBI, the Reserve Bank of India, was concerned about how Paytm shares this information with its associates. Your information, how is it shared? The company could also be under scrutiny over its investors. One of them is Chinese. One of Paytm investors is Chinese. It's a company called Antfin, an affiliate of the Alibaba Group. As of December last year, Antfin held almost 10% stake in Paytm, and increasingly, Chinese companies have come under the scanner in India. Their investments and their activities are all being scrutinized here in India. Could this ban be related to such scrutiny? Could it be linked to the Chinese investment in Paytm? We do not know for sure. But Paytm has its task cut out. After the RBI's orders, their shares crashed today by 20%. The company says it is taking immediate steps to comply with the RBI's directions and to address its concerns, but the crackdown sends a message to all, especially to other digital payment providers. While they bring a payment revolution in India, they cannot play fast and loose with the rules. Our next story comes from America, where a few months ago, parents of 60 teenagers filed a lawsuit. Their children allegedly bought drugs via social media on apps like Facebook and Snapchat. Some of these drugs were fentanyl-laced pills. The teens overdosed, and some of them died. So yesterday, a fiery hearing was held in the US Senate, and drugs were not the only issue at hand. It was also about harmful messaging, online bullying, harassment, sexual exploitation, self-harm, and predatory marketing. The 7 plagues of social media. CEOs of 5 tech giants were present. They were questioned for almost 4 hours. The senators battered them. They accused the companies of failing to protect children on their platforms and, quote-unquote, having blood on their hands. But most of all, these 2 top bosses got the worst of their ire. Meta CEO Mark Zuckerberg and Snapchat CEO Evan Spiegel.
37% of teenage girls between 13 and 15 were exposed to unwanted nudity in a week on Instagram. You knew about it. Who did you fire?
Senator, this is why we're building all
Who
these
did you
different
fire?
tools. Senator, I don't think that's...
Who did you fire?
I'm not going to answer that.
Because you didn't fire anybody, right? You didn't take any significant
I don't think
action.
it's appropriate to talk about like
It's not
individual HR
appropriate.
decisions.
Do you know who's sitting behind you?
Senator, our job and what we take seriously is making sure that we build industry-leading tools, find harmful
To
content,
make money.
take it off the services.
Have you apologized to the victims? Show them the pictures. Would you like to apologize for what you've done to these good people?
I'm sorry for everything that you've all been through. It's terrible. No one should have to go through the things that your families have suffered.
And this is why we invested so much and are going to continue doing industry-leading efforts to make sure that no one has to go through the types of things that your families have had to suffer.
Tech giants are like the British monarchy. They acknowledge the loot and the slavery, but they refuse to apologize for it. And they fail to make amends. So Mark Zuckerberg's apology has gone viral, even if he was guilt-tripped into it. It was a grand gesture, great for the pictures. But what came out of this hearing? Nothing constructive. The big cats were grilled. Most of their answers were defensive. They were asked about their steps to protect children online, and their answers were lukewarm. The Kids Online Safety Act was discussed. This is a proposed law in America, the Kids Online Safety Act. It requires social media sites to prevent harm to minors. 3 out of 5 CEOs did not pledge their support to it. Did the top bosses of these mammoth tech giants even want to attend the hearing? Not particularly. 3 out of 5 were sent government-issued subpoenas. They were practically dragged to this hearing. It's a sad state of affairs, but it's not shocking. The Congress has held dozens of such hearings. But children's online safety has stagnated. At this point, everyone knows the problem. Not just parents and teachers, but policymakers as well. They know that there is a problem. This month, the New York City mayor classified social media as a public health hazard. He called it an environmental toxin. And he's not being extra. Look at these numbers. Child sex images are more widely available than ever. The content on online platforms grew from 32 million in 2022 to over 36 million last year. 36 million pornographic images of children. In fact, last year, New Mexico's Attorney General sued Meta. He called it the world's single largest marketplace for pedophiles. On top of this, social media is fueling a mental health crisis. 46% adolescents say that social media makes them feel worse about their body image. 64% are often exposed to hate-based content. This is concerning beyond measure, and the inability to take action over it is just as frustrating. Sure, tech giants are at fault, but demanding that they do better is an argument in bad faith. Big tech is like big tobacco, or the alcohol or gambling industry. Why would they set up guardrails for themselves? Their financial interest lies in keeping users on their platforms. 99% of Snapchat revenue comes from displaying ads to users. The figure for Meta is 98%. Screen time is their revenue stream. So kids suffer and social media profits, which is why the burden, the onus, is on governments. They have to acknowledge negative impacts of social media, create policies to regulate these companies, and make sure that children are protected. They have to ensure that tech giants sell their products in a way that protects vulnerable users. And this is exactly what public regulation is for. Our governments need to do better. So Mark Zuckerberg may have apologized, but this is not a hooray moment. The apology is not enough. Far from it. We need laws, we need action, we need protection. The internet can be a dangerous place, and not just because of social media, but also because of state actors. Here's why I say this. The US has made a big claim. It has accused China of launching a major cyber attack. It targeted America's key infrastructure. The attack could have potentially hijacked internet connections of hundreds of people, targeted water treatment plants, the transport system, even the electric grid. The US says it has foiled the attack. It was able to defend itself. It pushed back the Chinese hackers. But in recent months, there have been growing claims of cyber attacks between the two arch rivals. So are the US and China in the middle of a cyber war? Our next report explores.
Imagine this. You are sitting in your home. It's a normal day, but suddenly everything changes. There is a sudden power outage. The lights go out. You rush out to figure out the cause. Your neighbor calls. They are complaining about a water outage. And when you look outside, there is chaos on the streets. The traffic lights are suddenly going haywire. That was an imaginary scenario. But the US is worried that one day this could be the reality. The threat is real, and it comes from China.
China's hackers are positioning on American infrastructure in preparation to wreak havoc and cause real-world harm to American citizens and communities if and when China decides the time has come to strike.
This week, the FBI director appeared before lawmakers. He informed them about a Chinese operation. Hackers based in China tried to target the US. The group's name is Volt Typhoon. It is believed to have Beijing's backing. The hackers targeted American public infrastructure, like the power grid and pipelines. They wanted to hack into their system and take control. For this operation, the Chinese exploited a vulnerability. They discovered that many offices in the US still use old internet routers, so they decided to hack those. Once they found their way in, the hackers installed a piece of malware. If the hack hadn't been discovered, China could have taken over America's vital infrastructure like water treatment plants, the power grid system, the transport systems, oil and gas pipelines, and telecommunication networks. But the US was able to detect the hack quickly and take measures to dismantle the malware. On its part, Beijing denies trying to hack America's critical infrastructure.
China firmly opposes and has cracked down on all forms of cyber attacks in accordance with the law. The US side jumped to conclusions in the absence of substantial evidence and made groundless accusations and smears against China, which is extremely irresponsible and confusing right with wrong. China is firmly opposed to this.
But the US is not buying China's claims. America is beefing up its defenses. Some lawmakers have compared these cyber attacks to placing bombs on the battlefield.
This is the cyberspace equivalent of placing bombs on American bridges, water treatment facilities, and power plants. There is no economic benefit for these actions. There's no pure intelligence gathering rationale. The sole purpose is to be ready to destroy American infrastructure, which would inevitably result in chaos.
The battle lines between Washington and Beijing have been drawn, and China, it appears, is trying to squeeze every strategic advantage it can get.
Now let's turn to Europe. European Union leaders are in Brussels. They're meeting to discuss Ukraine, funding to Ukraine. They've secured it. But it seems they've been ignoring a problem closer to home, the plight of European farmers. Farmers across the EU are angry, and they've been protesting for weeks. Today, they intercepted their leaders in Brussels.
First of all, we decided to come here to join with other kind of European young farmers to create a unique voice, not against, but with the cooperation of the European Parliament and the other kind of politics, because we'd like to safeguard our tradition, our farmers' mood, our quality of food, but to safeguard the majority part of this kind of situation, the dignified incomes.
He spoke about cooperation, but tempers were running high. Hundreds set up their tractors in front of the European Parliament building. The police erected barriers to keep the farmers out, but the building was pelted with eggs instead. Some farmers lit bonfires and fireworks. They set tires, cardboard boxes and hay ablaze. The police rushed to douse the flames and ended up hosing the protesting farmers as well. This led to even more anger. The farmers tried to tear down the barricades. They clashed with the police. A statue was toppled. It was pure chaos. This is what happens when leaders do not listen. For weeks now, farmers have been protesting across Europe, in Belgium, Germany, Italy, Spain, Portugal, and especially France. Farmers in every corner of the EU are angry.
Because we are protesting today against so many rules from Europe. It's too many for doing normal farming.
They're angry at EU regulations, angry at the loss of subsidies, and angry at cheap imports unfairly undercutting their livelihoods. The European Union has strict regulations when it comes to food quality, and the farmers have to adhere to this. And that is expensive. And green regulations add to this. The EU wants to reduce the environmental impact of farming, the greenhouse gas emissions, soil erosion, and the rest. Adhering to all these green rules also adds to the cost of farming. Farmers do get some subsidies to keep their overheads down, but some EU members wanted to reduce these subsidies. Germany and France wanted to cut the subsidy on agricultural diesel, for example. That is what sparked the protests in these countries. It led to an outpouring of pent-up anger because these farmers say they're being undermined. They adhere to the expensive EU rules, but their nations import food from elsewhere. One example is grain from Ukraine. Another is genetically modified corn from the Americas. European farmers feel let down by their own governments. They feel penalized for following the rules. And that anger and sorrow was on display in Brussels today. The European leaders say that they understand.
And I'd be among one of quite a number of heads of government here who understand the pressures that our farmers are under, whether it's increased energy costs or fertiliser costs, new environmental regulations. It's kind of been layer on layer for farmers. We can't have a situation whereby we impose environmental regulations on farmers and then allow imports from countries that don't have those same regulations. That wouldn't be fair.
But talk is cheap. The EU needs to do better by their farmers, find a balance between environment and livelihood, protect farmers from unfair competition and make farming viable again. If they do not, today's protest could just be the beginning. Our next story is about AUKUS. Do you know what it is? It is a security pact between three nations. That's Australia, the United Kingdom and the United States. AUKUS, AUKUS. AUKUS was formed in 2021 to enhance security in the Indo-Pacific region. Now, Australia's neighbour wants in. That's New Zealand. It has shown interest in joining AUKUS. But one country is objecting to this. Any guesses? It's China. Beijing sees AUKUS as a threat. It is calling the group's expansion a wrong and dangerous path. New Zealand says Australia is like family. They're stronger when they work together. What does this mean for AUKUS membership, and how will this impact the Indo-Pacific region? Our next report explains.
This week, Australia and New Zealand held official talks. Defence and foreign ministers from the two nations met each other. They discussed something called AUKUS. What's that? AUKUS is a trilateral security agreement. The group is named after its three members. That's Australia, the United Kingdom, and the United States of America. The grouping came together in 2021. The three members say it's for enhancing security in the Indo-Pacific region. But AUKUS is much more than that. It's also about arming allies. Australia will get 8 nuclear submarines. The US and the UK will work together to deliver them. The deal is worth almost $370 billion. The first nuclear submarine will be handed to Australia by late 2030s. And there is one country that's on edge about AUKUS. It's China. Beijing sees the trilateral grouping as a threat, and there's more bad news for them. A new member wants in, Australia's neighbour, New Zealand. AUKUS currently has only 3 members. They are part of what's called Pillar 1. Now they want to expand the partnership. It will be called Pillar 2. The expansion of the group will focus on military capabilities and interoperability. New Zealand has already shown interest.
Increasingly, the rules-based order which we rely on as democratic countries is under threat. And in this complicated strategic environment, one thing is crystal clear. Australia is our closest friend and partner. It's our family, and we are stronger when we work together.
And Australia has welcomed New Zealand's interest.
And finally, we have agreed to send a team to New Zealand very shortly to brief New Zealand on developments in relation to AUKUS, and particularly AUKUS Pillar 2. I think the content and the manner in which we have spoken today really does reflect two countries which have a very shared view of the world and a shared sense of how both of us need to go about our business in terms of working in the world.
China says that the expansion of AUKUS threatens peace and harmony.
For their own geopolitical interests, the United States, Britain, and Australia ignore the concerns of the international community and go further down a wrong and dangerous path.
Take that with more than just a pinch of salt. AUKUS plans to go beyond working together on just nuclear submarines. Hypersonic missiles and advanced radar technology are on the agenda as well. There have also been reports of including Japan and India in AUKUS. And while China feels cornered, they have no one to blame but themselves. Beijing's aggressive actions in the South China Sea have had a unifying impact. Countries that were neutral are now changing their stance. New Zealand is the first to do so, and chances are it won't be the last.
Now let's come back to India and talk about something other than the budget. There's another big development in India, something that will last for years to come. India is set to become a hub for artificial intelligence developers. Next week, we'll see AI tours by both Microsoft and Google. Microsoft CEO Satya Nadella is visiting Bengaluru and Mumbai on the 7th and 8th of this month. He will give talks about opportunities with AI. And he will meet tech industry leaders in both cities. Meanwhile, Google's chief scientist, Jeff Dean, is also going to be in Bengaluru. He will give talks on AI's next frontier. He'll also meet developers and startups. So the message is clear. Silicon Valley is banking on AI, and they're looking at India to fuel this growth, which should come as no surprise. For years, India has been at the forefront of technological growth. Indian computer engineers and data scientists are famous the world over. Look at the two companies coming down, Microsoft and Google. Both are run by Indian origin engineers turned CEOs, Satya Nadella and Sundar Pichai. It is no coincidence that they reached the top and they're looking back at India for the next generation of developers. India is already home to 5 million programmers, 5 million. About 500,000 developers specializing in AI and data sciences. That's according to NASSCOM, in India's technology industry trade body, NASSCOM. Silicon Valley has seen the rich potential in India. Microsoft India and South Asia President Puneet Chandok has said, and I'm quoting, "Every sixth AI researcher, AI builder, AI developer is coming from India." And he's not alone. Microsoft Asia's President Ahmad Mazari pointed to GitHub, a Microsoft-owned platform for developers. He said, and I'm quoting, "Today, 1 in 4 AI projects on GitHub comes from India. India provides 1 in 6 AI developers and 1 in 4 projects," which means India is obviously the place to look when searching for AI talent. Mazari also said that by 2026, India will have eclipsed the US. India is very uniquely positioned to enable the adoption of AI at scale at home and in international markets. Indian developers will lead the AI race both at home and abroad, and Silicon Valley knows this. Microsoft and Google's high-level visits are just the beginning. Microsoft wants to create more AI specialists. It has announced a training program for developers. It says it will train 100,000 developers in artificial intelligence to transform more of India's programmers into AI specialists. And Indian firms are not far behind. IT giants Infosys and Tata Consultancy Services have begun AI training as well. They want to transform their existing workforce, get them familiar with artificial intelligence and export this expertise around the world. So the AI boom could be a huge opportunity for India, allowing for another conquest of Silicon Valley, or even better, a chance to make India the new hub. India is already contributing to the world. Microsoft's Chandok said, and I'm quoting again, India's influence extends beyond its borders as it is projected to contribute approximately 16% of the incremental global GDP. 16% of the incremental global GDP. With a base within the country, Indians could bring more of that growth home. It's something to think about. And it may be why the government of India plans to invest in deep tech. In the budget today, Nirmala Sitharaman announced a $12 billion corpus. It's for the youth, to give them long-term, low-interest financing, even up to 50-year interest-free loans. This corpus is to incentivize long-term tech growth and spur India's already vibrant AI sector. One thing is certain after all of this. AI is the future, and the future of AI is India. International space race to the moon has been hot for a while now, thanks to the possibility of ice on its surface. At the center of this race is the lunar South Pole. Last year, India's Chandrayaan-3, the Chandrayaan-3 mission, did the impossible. It made the first soft landing there. Now, NASA has selected the site for its next mission in 2026, and China plans to create future habitats there. But a NASA study is ringing alarm bells too. It says the moon is shrinking. And that is not the biggest problem. When the moon shrinks, it creates moonquakes, much like the earthquakes on our planet. Each moonquake can last for a few hours. So why is the moon shrinking? Does this discourage space exploration to the moon? Our next report tells you.
Frank Sinatra once famously sang, "Fly me to the moon." Now, someone may need to tell him that's probably not a good idea. We aren't saying this, a new study is. It was funded by NASA. We mention this so you know that we aren't just howling at the moon. This is serious business, and it is ringing alarm bells. The study says that the moon is shrinking. You heard that right? Our beloved moon is shrinking. Now, Gen Z may say, first craters, now wrinkles. Clearly the moon needs a skincare regime. But it's not that simple. Despite what its appearance may suggest, the moon has a hot interior. The outer layer of its interior is molten, and with time it keeps cooling off. As it cools, the moon shrinks. The interior volume changes, so the crust has to adjust, and the surface creases. Think of it like a drying grape. It shrivels into an ugly, wrinkled raisin. The same thing is happening to the moon. Like most things in space, this is a slow process. Over the past few million years, the moon has shrunk about 150 feet in circumference. But the shrinking is not the worst part. What it leads to is the problem. You see, the moon's surface is brittle, so when it shifts, the wrinkles formed are actually cracks, like faults on Earth. Faults are fracture zones on the surface. Because of this, the moon is prone to quakes. Much like earthquakes on our planet, it suffers moonquakes. They can last for hours and cause landslides. The strongest moonquake recorded was equivalent to a 5.0 magnitude earthquake. On Earth, this magnitude is considered moderate, but on the moon it is much worse, and such moonquakes could happen anywhere, even on the lunar South Pole. Yes, the South Pole, which scientists are constantly mooning over. The lunar South Pole is at the heart of a fierce space race because it may contain ice, which could further space exploration and help settle human colonies there. Last year, Russia's Luna 25 spacecraft attempted to reach it. It crashed en route. Days later, India's Chandrayaan-3 mission made the first successful soft landing in the area. Now, NASA has selected the region for its next mission, the Artemis 3 mission in 2026. And China wants to create future habitats there. Does a shrinking moon affect these plans? To an extent, yes. Moonquakes could be a problem for future manned landing missions, but the danger posed is limited, simply because the missions last for short durations. And moonquakes are infrequent. But for long-term plans, like sending future human settlers to the moon, moonquakes would be a problem. The only upside is the quakes would create a new opportunity. They would help us understand the moon better. So while this study may dampen some plans, it also illuminates the lunar surface further. Not in the real sense, of course. We have the sun for that.
And now it's time for Vantage Shots, images that tell the story. Clashes erupted in Greece during demonstrations against plans to let foreign private universities operate in the country. In neighbouring Italy, animal rights activists daubed paint on the iconic Fountain of Lions. Now, you've heard of dog cafes, even cat cafes, but have you heard of a pig cafe? There is one in Japan, and it offers coffee and cuddles. Finally, taking you back in history to 1946, on this day, 1st February, former Norwegian Foreign Minister Trygve Lie became the first Secretary General of the United Nations. That's all we have for you today. Thanks for watching. We'll see you tomorrow.
At the City Corporation banquet to the United Nations delegates. Not for a long time has the old building seen so many distinguished figures on a single occasion. Yes, it all looks rather complicated, but Mr. Trygve Lie seems to enjoy the medieval flavour.
Oh, hello. Oh, hello. Oh, my goodness.